Welcome to Human Inc. TV. We're so glad to have you for another episode. Today we're interviewing with Kyri from Adiplus, working in crowdfunding and crowd equity sourcing for online distribution. We're excited to hear his points on innovation and fintech sources and startups. Kyri, thanks for having us today.
Thank you.
So can you tell us a little about yourself first?
Okay, yeah, my name is Kyri Andreou. I'm a British citizen, been living in Malaysia about 30 plus years. I'm one of the co-founders of Adiplus, and we're one of the 6 licensed equity crowdfunding platforms in Malaysia. My background is more branding marketing, so my portfolio in Adiplus obviously includes branding, marketing and all that, but it also includes product innovation, new strategy development and things like that.
So, I'm curious right off the bat here, there's a lot of ways in which you could be excited about what's coming in the pipeline of new businesses that need funding or how they find funding. What's exciting you about changes in the market here in Malaysia and around the world?
Okay, in terms of technical innovations, I haven't seen really that many that are really pioneering or breakthrough. The areas that I'm seeing some kind of interest in, or some kind of innovation, if you like, is possibly in the areas of new business models. I think a lot of what we're seeing currently right now, unfortunately, tends to be adaptations of what has happened elsewhere, and it's been adapted here. Incremental innovations, very much so. And I think that's a cultural thing as well, to a certain extent. And take for example the authorities here. In order to spur or allow for innovation, they create what you call sandboxes and all that, which are really restricted play areas for you to try out new products and services. But from my perspective, it tends to be in a very artificial kind of environment and things like that. So really, at this moment in time, I see the issue being very much cultural and also very much in terms of the support system here. And that is just to essentially look at innovations in terms of, if you like, improving the status quo, improving efficiencies, improving bottom lines, and so forth. And it tends to be, I see very little in terms of coming from the improving the customer perspective, performance perspective, okay. The service and all that, and it's more about improving companies' bottom line. So I've not really been excited by too much at this moment in time. Having said that, some of the things that do interest me are things like the company that we funded, which is a social enterprise. We successfully funded on our platform recently, and they have a social mission. And there's another company that's coming that will be listed soon, and they also have a social mission to their business model and everything else. And I think that's exciting. That's interesting. That's a new dimension and all that. So it doesn't always have to be about the technology. What interests me is more the business model, but also I think that's increasingly more important. Our view is that what you do is not as important now as how you do it. And if you have that, I think if you have that heritage or that philosophy of wanting to do good, wanting to change things, and this to me is the full potential of, or should be the full potential of fintech. It's not about improving bottom line and efficiencies and all that. To us, fintech is about changing systems. It's about creating new paradigms, if you like, of economic activity and business activity and all that. Because I think the present one at the moment is pretty broken. So I think this is the potential of fintech and potential of innovation and all that. And right now, we're not seeing enough of that, but I think companies that have a strong social mission as their basis have probably more sustainability moving forward.
Do you feel like that the crowdsourcing, the methods that you're using actually allow for social enterprises to get funded at a greater rate, or does that how they do affect how much funding they receive?
Basically, the model works the same. I mean, our services offer it. We are looking now to facilitate it in a much greater way by building, if you like, a whole ecosystem around them to support them and all that. We're trying to change the way how people view social enterprises. Their benefits to a wider community and all that. And this, again, was borne out during the fundraising for this particular social enterprise, that people didn't just come in because they thought that it was going to be a great financial return. They came in because they believed in what they were doing. They were passionate about what they were doing. They wanted to support it. And this is the power of, this is the, if you like, the greatest power of crowdfunding. It is the community, if you like, or the tribe, or whatever you want to term it, support for a particular project or business and everything else. And usually the underlying thing is it doing good? How good is it doing, you know? And does it fit in with my philosophy, my own personal philosophy, and how I view the world and everything else? So I think if there's a match there, that makes it very exciting. We're trying to facilitate that as much as possible as well. So we're looking into creation of a token-based scheme using blockchain, where we can incentivize investments into such enterprises and all that. And this is on the drawing board, and we've discussed it already with our regulator. And we hope that this year we'll be able to launch this. So yeah, I think this will be quite breakthrough.
I think of crowdsourcing as a pretty excellent disintermediary between old systems and new systems. How have you seen crowdsourced materials and crowdsourced funding options really make a play and make a change?
Where we are right now is probably crowdfunding or crowdsourcing 1.0. And interestingly enough, we're seeing the emergence now of what I would say true P2P kind of models, which is, you know, person to person. Where there isn't, you're talking about disintermediation, where you're removing a lot of that existing friction that exists even currently right now. Even for us, we do have a certain amount of friction within our setup. You know, there are still there's trustees, there's payment gateways, and everything else, and even us sitting in between the issuer and the investor is almost like an intermediary as well. But now you're getting things like, for example, ICOs, initial coin offerings, which are quite interesting and all that. So I think, I would see this as really evolving into crowdfunding 2.0, and obviously that's part of one of the reasons why we decided to some time back is to look at how we can take out the friction that exists right now within equity crowdfunding, and make it as if you like, frictionless and easy and cost effective. And the other thing that's also important is removing the time element as well, so making it a lot faster for companies. And I think with that, if you can do that, then obviously you lower your costs, and therefore you can actually target more smaller types of entrepreneurs and smaller types of investments as well. You know, for us, crowdfunding is about involvement of the crowd. It shouldn't be a syndicated play. It shouldn't be where you know everybody should have an equal opportunity. It should be democratic. It's about democratizing investment, democratizing wealth. Therefore, everybody should get an opportunity to invest, participate in projects that they support and all that. And but I think the trust element has to be there, and this is what obviously coming from a regulated framework environment, if you like, gives us a certain element of trust. But it doesn't mean to say that we can be complacent with that, and we want to build on that. And we're using that's why we've embarked on using blockchain technology, because we see it as the protocol of trust moving into the future. So you know we can so for example, if funds come in, they can sit in a digital trustee, as opposed to, you know, which tremendously reduces the cost and things like that, eliminates the need for payment gateways and all kinds of things, allows for smaller denominations and so forth. So I think so you can get much more greater involvement from a wider community, and obviously, you know, from a global, if you like, participation, as opposed to. So and I think this is very exciting for businesses. It can be on a project basis for small businesses. It can be on a investment equity basis and so forth. The variations are not limited, you know, in terms of how you can combine all those things. You know.
So this is just a fun thought on my part. You said it's becoming 2.0. What does 3.0 possibly look like to you?
It's so difficult to predict the future. You know, I mean. I'm not a futurist. I try to keep it abreast of, obviously, of things that are moving ahead. But there's just so many variables involved. But I think the token or the multiple currency emergence of multiple currencies will be one of the key things that are going to be driving this. I think if you look at it on what is interesting, you try and take a step back. And the emergence of crowdfunding and everything else. It's interesting that what we're seeing now is, if you like, more decentralization of everything. I think the 20th century, probably centralized institutions have reached that epoch, and what we're holding on to now with centralized, if you like, centralized role of state, centralized role of institutions is
central banks.
Central banks, yeah, essentially, is probably outdated. The tools they have are ineffective in a digital environment. Essentially, that's what it is. So I think what you're going to be seeing as I think the great driving force, and this whole decentralization is not just limited to business or finance or things like that. It's actually, if you look at it on a social basis as well. I think even like in terms of the nation state, the role of the nation state, our politics as well. It's all going to be redefined and everything else. And I think the great driving force of that is decentralization, and what has driven that is actually technology. And with technology, it's not just specifically technology. The thing with technology is that it gives you the ability to actually change your perspective on how you look at the world. If you remember before Galileo and the instrument he used to read the stars, man had a completely different perspective of how he stood in the universe, right? The Earth was the center of the universe and everything else. And after the discovery, Galileo's discovery that no, we're not. We're actually the center of it. That changed everything. It changed mathematics, it changed geometry, and it changed the way we looked at the world. And it led to a lot of scientific innovation and everything else. And it's much the same way. We now have tools that help us change the way we look at the world greatly, even in terms, and I think this is the thing that's going to be very profound over the next 5-10 years. You increasing computing power, the ability of artificial intelligence and things like that will change the way we can even measure now how companies impact the rest of society. So we're not going to limit it to, for example, to profit and loss of a company. That's only one measurement of how a company performs. If they're internalizing profits and externalizing cost, then that has to be addressed. Yeah. So I think, and we've never had the tools before or the ability to do that.
But now the tools exist.
Now, exactly. So it's going to change the way we're going to be looking at business. It's going to change the way we're going to be looking at economics. It's going to be changing the way we look at a whole host of things. Yeah.
I'm curious about, though, the role of design that comes in when you see new startups, and the role of design as refers to when you are working on your platform. How do you think about who uses your platform? How do you think about the kind of companies you want to attract? How do you think about the kinds of people and know the kind of people with empathy that are looking to invest through crowdsourcing?
Yeah, good question. Okay, I'll speak from the perspective of our platform and how we go about it. We've looked at it obviously in great detail, and I think before we even get to the design. Designing a design, if you like, and the experience, the customer centricity and the user experience and all that on our platform, we have a philosophy, we have a clear philosophy, and that is to support entrepreneurs as much as possible. The thing to remember with equity crowdfunding, there's two essential constituents in it that make a successful platform. If you like, you look at multi-phase platforms, and there's always there's always more than one constituent in them. So we're trying to balance two, if you like. But I always feel that when you try to balance, you always compromise. You tend to compromise. And our passion is about entrepreneurs. We're all entrepreneurs. The founders are all entrepreneurs themselves. And we've all known the difficulty of experience, the difficulty of trying to fundraise. So that was always been our underlying, if you like, drive and all that. But that doesn't mean to say we negate or we diminish the responsibility in terms of the investor. But essentially, we structured everything around these two constituents, and from the issuer or the entrepreneur's point of view, what is it that they require? And the real key thing for them is about compliance. So how do we help them with compliance? What do we mean by compliance? And then on the other side, which is the investor side, it's all about risk management. How do we help them with risk management? What are the tools? What are the experiences we help to give them that they can manage their risk? Our premise is also that we don't look at ourselves as an online VC, and that is quite critical, because first of all, that means we don't even use language like due diligence.
No, language is critical on that.
Absolutely, because when you start to frame things as due diligence, and then you go down a certain path, immediately you will approach your process in terms of assessing them more like an analyst, more like a VC, investment bank, which we're not supposed to be doing. You start looking at valuations. Right, yeah. Right. And so we stay away from that. But it doesn't mean to say we diminish our responsibility in terms of making quality, allowing for quality deals to come through. But at the same time, we think that, okay, every entrepreneur has the right to have his say, get on the soapbox, and this is my business, this is what I want, I'm passionate about it and everything else. But with the compliance, it's one is in terms of having the information that's required, sufficient information that is coherent and complete enough for an investor to make an informed decision. Mm-hmm. So we help them with that, and what we've done is design templates. So we templatize a lot of the business plan, the financials and everything else. So all the information that they require, term sheets and all that will all reflect that, and so that will all be done. We provide all that already. We're looking to improve the process for this. Currently, we're launching a new product soon, which will allow an entrepreneur to be essentially listed within just over 2 weeks, which is extremely fast. Yeah. And it requires no interaction between us in a real setting. Okay. They can do it all themselves. If it's complete and coherent enough, we could list it with their video and everything else. And we're looking to reduce that even further. So we want to improve the speed, if you like, and automate a lot more of that. At the moment now, it's still a lot of quite a lot of manual interface, and we want to automate as much as possible. Understand, we look at ourselves as more of a tech fin company than a fintech company, and again, I think language is important. So that's what we're looking to do with entrepreneurs. The other part of compliance is not just to compliance in terms of what is required for investors to make an informed decision. It's also subsequent, after the successful listing, they have to manage their shareholders and everything else. So we are creating tools that will allow them to do that in a very cost-effective way, and these will be value-added products and services that we give them. So we give entrepreneurs an option. We give them a choice that we can help them in terms of their application and process, or they can do it themselves, and they're two different cost structures and all that. So the step-to-step guide, and if they, for example, if they're not too sure with valuation, we give them tools to be able to do it themselves. And the same thing with investors. What we do is we give them tools to help them with their own due diligence. It can be everything from market reports. We work with partners such as Frost & Sullivan, or it could be valuation tools. Again, that they can do their own assessment on. If they don't have an idea of how to do a valuation, that they can do it themselves and all that. But everything is weighed up against risk. If you are coming in with we've had a $10 investment, actually the lowest so far, which we're very happy about, because it really says that the crowd is getting involved. Then obviously you're not going to be spending a lot of time and money on tools to assess valuation. But if you're putting 20, 30, 50, maybe 100,000 into it, then obviously you're going to look at that more carefully. And again, we help them manage with that. So I think this is how we look at the user experience on our platform right now. This is the driving principles.
Of the companies that you try to find and make sure you're listing there, what kind of trends do you see about them thinking about design for either their end users and design for the equity sources they're going for?
Yeah, it really comes down to understanding your customers as much as possible, customer intimacy, if you like. Looking at how and I think this is what data possibilities with data is, that you can get much more intimately involved in with your customers. The more you understand, the more you know, and everything else. Obviously, everybody leaves a digital footprint, and people are looking at that and things like that. They are developing, if you like, more customized solutions too. There's no more mass, product anymore. You can have standard things, but a lot more things now being customized. And that is interesting, personalized, and I think that's very interesting. Also, it's not just the product or the service, but it's also the user experience, and I think that's interesting. When you can get down to that level, that everybody who goes onto, goes into a website or goes into use an app has its own individualized, personalized experience on it. That could be, and we are seeing one or two companies that are looking at that very much. And I think that is because they make the effort to understand their customers as much as possible. That customer intimacy. And I think they're taking it to new levels.
For our last question, I'm curious as to your experience working with both startups and entrenched players in a variety of markets. How are the two influencing each other? What are they learning from each other? And also, what are they coming into with new expectations?
In our early days, what we had, we did talk. There was a few banks that approached us, and initially, the interest was specifically, well, it was expressed. The expressed interest was about investing in us and things like that. Expressed interest. But I think what we've subsequently found, it was really they just wanted to understand us and see what kind of a threat we could play. And everything like that. And in those days, obviously, it was still very early for us, and we hadn't realized the full potential of actually what we were embarking upon with equity crowdfunding, because we were creating a total ecosystem, and it touches a lot of our areas. And the advantage for us is obviously we're not limited by legacy systems. We're not, to a certain extent, a bit of regulation, but I think not as much as say banks would are facing. But that is a double-edged sword for them, because it's on one hand it gives them that protection, but on the other hand it's a lot of work for them to, it's a costly restriction on them as well. In terms of nimbleness, I'm not really seeing it from the banking sector. Again, the improvements tend to be incremental. They're working with technology companies in terms of looking at those incremental improvements. There was supposed to be an initiative here, for example, on blockchain, looking at the area of trade finance, and I don't know what's happening with that. I don't think any bank here has embarked on any blockchain prototype project at all, which is quite disappointing, extremely disappointing. And the feedback I get is that nobody wants to be the first, and that is the culture here. Unfortunately, in terms of very few innovators or leaders. And I understand you see, with banks, technology innovation tends out to be a project. For banks to be truly revolutionary or disrupted, they'll have to change their business models, and they're going to have to change their legal models and all that, which is never going to happen.
That's
right?
difficult.
Right. Everything else. So but we are seeing on the apart from banks, we are seeing some companies, if you like, redefining the way they work with, or looking at working with, instead of having, for example, their own R&D or internal strategy team or whatever, they're actually working with fintech partners, and it's almost like outsourcing your R&D, but they're few and far between, very, very few and far between. There's some, of course, acquiring, but again, the acquisitions and everything else are really about incremental improvements in efficiency and bottom line, rather than a complete reinvention. We're waiting for here to look at, I think they're looking at the licensing of what we call digital banks, but I'm just wondering whether they're going to be internet rather than digital banks, which is a completely different thing. So we'll see how it goes. And in terms of the regulators, essentially, our regulators, the Securities Commission, they're progressive to an extent. They have a blockchain unit, they have a digital unit within SC. Good people there, smart people, forward thinking. They supported us in terms of, we became the first equity crowdfunding platform to accept cryptocurrencies for investments, and once we gave them the framework in terms of how we accommodate the regulatory requirements from, say, Bank Negara in terms of AML and money laundering and KYC, they were fine with that. And how do we treat the crypto investment on the balance sheet and things like that? So that's been accepted, and that was quite pioneer. We're coming up with they've accepted a new framework, a new structure that allows for greater participation from the crowd. We have a technical restriction in Malaysia in the Companies Act. Number of shareholders is 50. So if you want to have more than 50 shareholders in an equity crowdfunding exercise, you need to have a nominee structure. But we find that to be very cumbersome and expensive. So we've proposed an alternative which has been approved. And we look at it as if you like, as the forerunner to a complete digital structure.
Okay.
Which makes it a lot more interesting.
And this is relating back to your point earlier about that the changes are coming in terms of the business models, and not necessarily in the incremental changes. So you're seeing changes here, and I can understand that.
On Bank Negara side, I think I've mentioned that they have a sandbox for fintech companies, and that's about it. I wouldn't say it's a particularly dynamic kind of situation here at the moment. The Bitcoin is still looked as something to be frowned on. There's no, I've seen nothing anything major in blockchain at the moment, and hopefully we can change that.
Well, Kyri, it's been just really lovely today. I want to thank you for your time.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity.
We'll see you guys later on our next videos.